Saying goodbye to a beloved movie character can be tough for audiences, because if they've gotten to know them over the course of many movies, they can basically feel like a close friend or even a member of the family. Cinematic farewells can be hard going at the best of times, but sometimes there is an added layer or two which makes it that much more heartbreaking. I'm Ewan, you're watching What Culture, and here are 10 movie goodbyes that'll break you when you know the truth. Number 10. Sunrise for Roosevelt. Night at the Museum, Secret of the Tomb. The third and final entry into the live-action Night at the Museum franchise, Secret of the Tomb, had something of a melancholic pall cast over it by the tragic death of Robin Williams barely 4 months before its premiere. The film ends with the New York exhibits losing their ability to come to life, and that includes Williams' own Teddy Roosevelt, who gets his own distinct farewell with museum guard Larry, played by Ben Stiller. Roosevelt doesn't merely say goodbye to Larry though. He tells him, "Smile, my boy, it's sunrise," before turning to wax forevermore. It's basically impossible to watch this scene without thinking of how Williams' own life ended, and so this served as a seemingly inadvertent goodbye to the millions of fans who had adored the actor's work for decades. It becomes even more bittersweet in light of more recent revelations from the film's director, Shawn Levy, that Williams struggled to get through the shoot and was anxious about the quality of his performance. We were in the midst of a man suffering through something truly horrible, and yet he still managed to bring warmth and humanity to this character as he returned to wax. Truly missed, there'll never be another Robin Williams. Number 9. To Absent Friends. Star Trek Beyond. To more casual viewers of Star Trek Beyond, Captain Kirk's closing toast to absent friends seems to be a pointed nod to the death of Spock Prime, as played by Leonard Nimoy, at the start of the film, and of course to the actor himself, who passed away mere months before Beyond started shooting. But that final toast, which was itself previously featured in the original Star Trek III The Search for Spock, ended up taking an entirely unfortunate double meaning due to the real-life tragedy which occurred mere weeks before Beyond's release. Anton Yelchin, who played Ensign Chekhov in the new Trek trilogy and was a seriously talented up-and-coming actor, died in a car accident at his home barely a month before Beyond came out. And so Kirk's toast ultimately felt like an unintended tribute to Yelchin as well, aided by the camera immediately cutting to a shot where Chekhov is in the center of the frame. Knowing that this is our final glimpse of Yelchin's Chekhov in this Star Trek universe, no matter whether a fourth Trek film ever actually gets made or not, lends an added layer of poignance to an already powerful closing sequence. Number 8. Carol Ann is saved. Poltergeist 3. Poltergeist 3 ends with the series' young protagonist, Carol Ann Freeling, played by Heather O'Rourke, being saved and reunited with her Aunt Pat, played by Nancy Allen. It's supposed to be a triumphant moment, and yet, for anyone unaware, the production of Poltergeist 3 was beset by one of the worst things imaginable. Several months after principal photography had wrapped, 12-year-old Heather O'Rourke passed away from a congenital bowel defect. This obviously devastated the cast and crew and also created major production complications as the film's ending needed to be reshot, with O'Rourke's Carol Ann expected to be a major presence in the sequence. As a result, the climax ended up using a body double for O'Rourke, and so when Carol Ann is reunited with Pat in the new climax, Carol Ann's face is kept out of view, because of course, we're not looking at the original actress. Knowing this, and that the cast and crew had to complete this sequence while freshly grieving their young co-star, makes it an especially wrenching conclusion to Carol Ann's arc and the original Poltergeist trilogy. Number 7. Edward's father dies. Edward Scissorhands. For the many who first saw Edward Scissorhands in their youth, and for which it served as a gateway drug into the mind of Tim Burton and maybe gothic horror too, the significance of Vincent Price's cameo was surely lost. Horror legend Price appears briefly in a flashback as the creator of Johnny Depp's Edward, an inventor who dies of a heart attack before he can quote-unquote complete Edward by giving him human hands. This actually ended up being Price's final major movie role, role. And once you're aware that you're watching a legend of the horror genre, someone who had a huge impact on Burton's own career even, at the end of his life, the cameo takes on a whole other level of bittersweet poignance. Price was suffering from both chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and Parkinson's disease during shooting, and as brilliant as he is in his scenes, his poor health absolutely transpires into his character, as is appropriate considering what becomes of the inventor in the film. A real bittersweet goodbye. Number 6. M. Bison goes down for the count. Street Fighter 1994. In theory, there shouldn't be anything even remotely emotional about the apparent demise of villain M. Bison at the end of 1994's Street Fighter movie, when he's kicked into his own monitor wall by hero Guile, as played by Jean-Claude Van Damme. However, it's not much of a secret that actor Raul Julia was suffering from stomach cancer during production, and ultimately died just 2 months before the movie's release in theaters. What's somewhat less known though is that Julia chose to star in Street Fighter as his final movie at the behest of his children, because he wanted to end his career in a film which his kids would enjoy. Them being fans of the Street Fighter games, it was a no-brainer, and they also helped their father prepare for the role. Julia was of course the only critically praised aspect of the film, many commending his campy performance, and knowing that he was swinging for the fences largely to entertain his own children, it's weirdly sad seeing M. Bison of all people get killed at the end. We say killed because, of course, the post-credit sequel bait ending reveals that Bison in fact survived to fight another day, even if Julia's death ensured that this thread wasn't ever followed up. Yeah, a beautiful man who shone in everything. Number 5. Q's final words to Bond. The world is not enough. Though it was clear that James Bond's best-known quartermaster, played by Desmond Llewelyn, wouldn't be sticking around forever, The World Is Not Enough wasn't actually intended to be Q's final film. However, Llewelyn died in a car accident mere weeks after the film's premiere, ensuring that Q's departing words in the film took on a whole other, tragically unexpected meaning. In his final interaction with Pierce Brosnan's 007, Bond asks Q if he's retiring, to which Q cryptically replies that he's always tried to teach him 2 things. Chief among them, always have an escape plan, just as Q disappears through a platform in the floor. In retrospect, it's quite the perfect farewell for the character, dropping a witty one-liner and then using a gadget to vanish out of frame. And yet, despite how fitting the scene feels as a natural retirement point for this iteration of Q, especially with the film introducing his successor R, as played by John Cleese, Llewellyn was fully expected to return for sequel Die Another Day. Number 4. Charon's death. John Wick Chapter 4. The fourth John Wick opens with the shocking death of a mainstay supporting character throughout the franchise, concierge of the New York Continental Hotel, Charon, as played by the late, great Lance Reddick. Charon is shot dead by the villainous Marquis Vincent de Gramont, played by Bill Skarsgård, in front of his longtime colleague Winston, played by Ian McShane, immediately assuring fans that the stakes have been seriously raised for this particular follower. Charon's death was always going to make for a tough farewell, but it became decidedly harder to watch given that Charon's actor Lance Reddick died suddenly of heart disease just a week before the movie's release. And so, John Wick Chapter 4's opening sequence became more haunting than anyone could have expected, especially as Charon tells Winston in his dying breaths, "It has been an honor, my friend," to which Winston retorts, "It should have been me." Later in the film, the point is further hammered home when Winston and John attend Charon's grave and commend just how good of a man he was. Obviously, the pair had no idea what was going to happen to their co-star following shooting, but these words took on an altogether different significance in light of Reddick's upsettingly untimely passing. Number 3. Norman's Heart on Golden Pond. The 1981 drama On Golden Pond stars Henry Fonda as Norman, a retired elderly professor who finds himself grappling with the ravages of old age, namely dementia and heart issues. At the end of the movie, Norman begins to have chest pains and collapses, much to the alarm of his wife Ethel, who's played by Katharine Hepburn. However, after a moment, the pain passes and Norman appears to be okay, as he and Ethel say farewell to the lakeside cottage they've been spending the bulk of the movie. On Golden Pond actually turned out to be Henry Fonda's final theatrical film role, and his closing moments on screen are nothing if not a reflection of the man's own health woes during his twilight. In later years, Fonda was himself stricken by cardiac issues, just like Norman, and ultimately died of heart disease just 8 months after On Golden Pond was released in cinemas. However, prior to his death, Fonda did win the Best Actor Oscar for his performance in the film. It was the single Oscar win of his entire illustrious career, though due to his declining health, his daughter Jane, who also starred in the film as Norman's own daughter, accepted it on his behalf. A total legend of the screen, and yeah, what a way to go out. Number 2. William Bloodworth's Curtain Call, Final Destination Bloodlines. The recent Final Destination Bloodlines marked the last appearance by the franchise's most recurring character, mortician William Bloodworth, played by Tony Todd. Here, a terminally ill Bloodworth has come to terms with the fact that death will be imminently coming for him, an especially poignant revelation given that Todd himself was in the late stages of stomach cancer when he filmed his role. Despite his physically weakened condition, Todd gives a superb final performance as Bloodworth, which offers up an affecting farewell to not only the character, but the actor himself. But it gets even more cutting, as filmmakers Zach Lipovsky and Adam Stein revealed that Bloodworth's departing lines were improvised by Todd himself, to allow him to say goodbye to fans in his own way. Before he exits the movie, Bloodworth says, quote, "I intend to enjoy the time I have left, and I suggest that you do the same. Life is precious. Enjoy every single second. You never know when. Good luck." Surely nobody ever expected a Final Destination movie of all things to leave them fighting back tears, but here we are. And number 1. Wiley's closing monologue, An American Tale, Fievel Goes West. 1991's animated sequel, An American Tale, Fievel Goes West, sees mouse protagonist Fievel, played by Philip Glazer, team up with canine sheriff Wiley Burp, voiced with glorious gusto by the legendary James Stewart. At the end of the movie, as Burp presents Fievel with his well-earned sheriff's badge, Fievel doubts his worthiness, only for Burp to retort with the film's final heartfelt monologue. He tells Fievel, "Just remember, Fievel, one man's sunset is another man's dawn. I don't know what's out there beyond those hills, but if you ride yonder, head up, eyes steady, heart open, I think one day you'll find that you're the hero you've been looking for." Oh, man, just what a way to signpost a career. It's a fantastic send-off for the Wiley Burp character as Fievel heads off on his own journey, and this ultimately turned out to be Jimmy Stewart's final film role before he retired from acting. And so, Burp's wistful monologue earns a whole other level of meaning, reflecting the uncertain road ahead for Stewart himself, who lived for another 6 years after the film's release, though largely retired from public life following the passing of his wife in 1994. An amazing man both on and off the screen, and one whose acting twilight served as a beautiful postscript to an equally beautiful career.